So we got the 369 spoilers, and this chapter is really strong. Like, one of the best of this arc so far, easily. Like, Izuku is going off in this one, and there's so many great sequences. So let's just get into it. Chapter begins with a flashback of All For One choking the second user as he's bleeding. He says that his quirk was only capable of controlling small objects, and we see All For One crushing a bullet headed his way from behind him without touching it. All For One says that he was an annoying insect with a quirk that was no more than a little hindrance. So he doesn't understand why Deku can use it in such a strong way, why he can see the second and Yoichi's ghosts behind the boy. So this is really interesting. We're getting a flashback of like over 100 years ago when All For One was actually fighting against the second user when he was still alive. And I don't know if this is necessarily their final battle or one of their battles, because as it says, he's bleeding from the face, and I guess this is how he got his scar. So either he escapes from this eventually and then he obtains the scar, and then, you know, that's how he gets it, or he gets the scar after he dies and it's represented in the vestige world. But this also lines up with what the second user was telling Izuku a couple chapters back. I think it was like 349, where he told him that his quirk now, which is apparently not called transmission and it's called gear shift, but his gear shift quirk is much stronger now since it has been amplified by One For All, and it's much stronger than it was when he had it back in the day, because apparently he'd only control small objects at that point. And I guess this does mean that his gauntlet things held projectiles that he would like touch, and then he could make them fire off like super fast. As for this bullet here, I don't know if he's manipulating that, because he's being held up in this sequence and the bullet's coming from behind him. So maybe it's somebody else firing it, maybe Yoichi, maybe the third user. And also it's being confirmed here that All For One can see the vestiges, which is really interesting. We asked this a couple videos back as well, and I don't know if this means that everybody can see the vestiges or just All For One, because you know how like the All For One quirk and the One For All quirk kind of have like this Wi-Fi-esque connection to them. The quirk is stronger because of One For All and can now control each cell individually. Used together with the raw strength of One For All, gives rise to a power that is able to distort the foundations of the world. Next, Deku hits Tomura All For One with a quintuple Detroit smash. The use of the smash onomatopoeia in this chapter is amazing. It's written 5 times on top of each other to convey the idea that Deku landed 5 blows in a second. Wow, this is amazing. So when Izuku activates gear shift and he touches himself, I suppose he's affecting all of his cells individually, speeding them up. Therefore, all of them working together, he as a being is being amplified via the speed of gear shift. And now he's like moving so fast that he's distorting the foundations of the world. And this sounds really amazing. I can't wait to see this in the chapter. But he's like moving so fast here that he can throw 5 Detroit smashes like nearly simultaneously. And they're all like layering on top of each other within a second. So this is an incredible sequence and pretty much overpowered for sure. And I'll get into that. Deku's flying around the battlefield like a bullet, but Tomura All For One notices that his last blows were not as strong, probably because he has no more Fajin in stock. He prepares to intercept the next blow, but Deku shifts into first gear and slows down to avoid it. Danger Sense activates, and Deku sees that Tomura All For One is going to hit him. So he uses Smokescreen, jumps high with Float, and pulls Tomura All For One with Black Whip. He then prepares his next attack, charged with Fajin that he stored with quintuple Detroit smash. So like I've been saying, this is incredible. Like, this is maybe one of the best sequences in the series possibly, and this is what we've always wanted. Izuku finally using all of his quirks at once, and it's pretty satisfying. But I just really love like how all of the quirks are not too completely overpowered, but it's just the way that he's using them, especially together synergistically, and how they all play off of each other. And it's kind of like clockwork, and it's just so cool. But things are going a little too good for Izuku. It's just a little too smooth right now, right? And it makes me think back to what the second user said in the previous chapter about how he has to defeat All For One in like 5 minutes or the world is going to end. And, you know, we could have taken that 2 ways. Either that means that the fight is literally going to end in 5 minutes and this is going to be rushed, or the 5 minutes is going to run out and Izuku is going to gas out / pass out, which we'll get into later. But I'm thinking that's going to happen because, like I said, things are looking too good for Izuku now. He's too powerful and he's just beating him down too good with, you know, little resistance here. And usually when that happens, if it's not like the last couple chapters, which I'm assuming that these aren't, he's eventually going to pass out, and then All For One is eventually going to get the upper hand again, and then, you know, we're going to have to go into that whole ticking clock where, you know, we got to get Izuku back to full power. The second user says that what Tomura All For One should fear is not the quirks, but the will that dwells within them. Deku remembers Banjo's words that he would be the one to complete One For All, and yells that he will end it once and for all so that All For One won't hurt anyone else. else. The punch was so strong that it opened a hole in Tomura All For One's chest. Yoichi says that he can see his brother inside, and that what the round-eyed young man Mirio said is true. This fight is affecting the fusion between All For One and Shigaraki. The second says that the real deal starts now, and that he needs to remember Shimura's words, and that he cannot pass out yet. All For One begins an internal monologue saying that it's unfair because he has not yet been able to use any quirk to show how strong his new body is. So yeah, this goes back to what we were just talking about, and I think this means that Izuku is eventually going to pass out here without like fully defeating All For One. But also All For One saying that like it's unfair that I wasn't able to use all my quirks to show how strong this new body is. That's very true. Like as soon as this battle started, Monoma and Aizawa just hit him with the erasure, and they've been hitting him with that since then. Like, it's never gone off. So we've never been able to see what he's truly been capable of here. We've only seen him just use like his standard quirk singularity equipped body, which, you know, kind of acts like a quirk in itself, but it's not, obviously, because there's so much more that he could do. And that also goes into why Izuku's probably going to pass out, so we can eventually see what he can do. I think it would be a little anticlimactic if we never see what All For One / Shigaraki can do here, because it was built up for so long. Like, oh my god, he's going to have the true All For One, all of the quirks that Yujiko has been building up and storing, even some new ones possibly that All For One couldn't use because his body just couldn't handle them, or it's going to revert him back to how All For One used his quirks in his prime, possibly. Erasure, the flying UA, the villains being divided, everything acted against him. This is when All For One screams, and 9 lights, very similar to the One For All ones, appear next to him. Deku looks confused, and Aizawa wonders if he still has some trick up his sleeve. All For One finishes his internal monologue by agreeing with Yoichi, saying that if all the efforts accumulated through the year are going to define the results of this battle, then he still has a winning chance. Cut to Spinner, who's giant and drooling, end of chapter. So I don't know what this means, and Horikoshi's cliffhangers have kind of been a little anticlimactic, so I'm not going to put too much on this, although it could be something. I mean, from what it's being described here, maybe All For One could tap into the vestiges of the quirks that he had stolen, but then again, I don't know how that would benefit him, because technically they should hate him, right? Unless he has like control over them and they're just going to be like zombies or whatever, but I still don't necessarily know what they're going to do. But also, I don't know if this necessarily means that that is an aspect of All For One, because the quirk is being nullified at the moment. So I guess it's got to be something else, you know, with his quirk singularity aspect body going on here. But also at the end here where it says cut to Spinner, who's giant and drooling, end of chapter, I guess this goes back to what we've been talking about these last couple videos, and that it is eventually going to cut away from this battle and go to the other ancillary battles, the other stuff that's been going on that we haven't touched on in a very long time. And I guess it's happening here because, you know, we're seeing what's going on with Spinner, and he's giant because All For One apparently gave him like a giant quirk on top of the quirk that he already has. And it's just kind of unfortunate that it's happening right now. Horikoshi probably should have did this earlier, because everything has been built up so much, everything's been so exciting, it's been riding such a high, and now it's gonna kind of dip back and go into the other stuff that, let's just call it for what it is, it's not as exciting as what's been going on here. So I think the interest in the series is definitely going to dip after this chapter, if we are in fact cutting away and going to the other stuff, which it seems like we are. But it's fine, you know, this prolongs the end, of course, and it gives the other characters the much needed development and arcs that they deserve, or at least I hope so. Let me know what you think about this stuff in the comments, and if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.